We are learning right now about how many Australians have already sold out to China. I talked about this last night. Well, within 24 hours of what I told you last night, it's now becoming quite obvious that there are always going to be a lot of people, and you're not going to have to go under too many rocks to find them, who are going to choose the mighty Chinese currency over Australian values. Australian values that says that we should have an international inquiry into how a virus made it from China around the world, killing 300,000 people and costing $6 trillion. You remember this from the start of the month. This is when China was very openly threatening that they were going to ruin our economy for the displeasure of demanding that inquiry. Well, as you have seen in the past couple of days, Australian farmers have been caught up here. First, when it comes to barley and the 80% tariff that may well be coming there. Well, today we learn about abattoirs, and 4 of those, or rather yesterday we learned about those 4 abattoirs. And then today there was even a conversation about potentially some bans on dairy. Now, as I said last night, what we will see is the number of people in Australian politics or business or academia who, when are faced with an economy being threatened not because we did something wrong but because we asked them to do something right, that normally the language that these people will start to use is that we need to moderate this discussion with China, that we need to massage the relationship. All of that, of course, is code for bend over and take it. Now, the truth is, if after 300,000 people die, after hundreds of millions of people's jobs have been interrupted and the global economy has come to a halt, surely there's a conversation to be had with whatever country it is believed that is the nucleus of where the virus got out of control at the very least. If they don't want to accept that it's where it started, it's certainly where it got out of control. And they knew it was trouble because they closed down their domestic air travel, but they let international air travel flourish. Well, they lined up around the block today. These are the sellouts. The people who think that the dollar is more important than the principle, that accountability doesn't happen to matter. It starts with the Victorian Treasurer. They've doubled down on their Belt and Road initiative. This is where they borrow money directly from China, and China, of course, calls it in moments like this. The inquiry, of course, does need to be an inquiry into this pandemic event. But I think the idea of vilification of any single nation in this context, I think, is dangerous, damaging, and potentially irresponsible in many respects. Seriously? There is only one nation to talk about in this. And while it might be uncomfortable for those who have been living off the teat for a while, we need to know. Because if we can learn something about how China handled it or didn't handle it, when another one comes from another part of the world, yes, even Australia, unlikely as that would be, we would be able to get on top of it. But it wasn't just there. They were lined up around the block. In Queensland today, it took just 3 days before the Queensland Premier decided that we need to manage the relationship. Code, take it from China, because the dollar is more important than accountability for the citizens that have died in Queensland because of the coronavirus.
China is an incredibly important trading partner to Queensland. Let me say that again. China is an incredibly important trading partner to Queensland. What I'm really concerned about is this potential for a trade war to erupt, and if we go into a full-blown trade war, this could mean over 3,200 workers impacted. I really would like this issue resolved as quickly as possible. I'll be writing to the Trade Minister today.
Well, firstly, I'll be writing a letter. This virus destroyed your state's economy. This virus saw your citizens die. But we need to make sure we manage the relationship. The whole point is that China is so thin-skinned, so glass-jawed, that for it to be held to the same standard as any other country in the world when it comes to responsibility in matters like this, they wet the bed. And because they do that, because their face couldn't possibly be lost. It must be saved at all costs. You have the people who are running the very health systems that have been impacted, the very economies that have been shut down, coming to the defence of China. Don't displease them. This is the same logic that says you can just build islands in the South China Sea. Now, my position is not that we are about to go to war with China or that we can even blacken their eye. My view is that we all stand there on Anzac Day and talk about the principles that many Australians had fought for. Well, I would imagine one of the principles that they have fought for, and one of the principles that we thought was the reason that government was in place, was to guarantee that if anyone did something that ruined our economy or killed our citizens, we would want to know what it is. Alas, we have the West Australian Premier as well. All of this in the past 24 hours. It took just a threat in a newspaper and a couple of threats over 2 days for all of these state leaders to start coming forward. Mark McGowan, perhaps one of the most compromised by the China relationship, well, he is well and truly dancing to Beijing's beat.
We have carried the nation over this period, and I don't think they understand that in Melbourne or Sydney or other parts of the country. But for Western Australia's trade and the fact that we have continued to export our minerals and our iron ore and our gold and our LNG and some of our agricultural products, the country would be in enormous trouble, and we would not be able to afford things like the JobKeeper payment and job seeker payment increases and big infrastructure packages.
What, so technically we should be thanking China because the minerals that are being sold to China are helping to pay for the welfare that was needed because China kept exporting, unintentionally, but still, the virus from Wuhan at the same time as it was guarding its own country against it? This is frightening about how compromised our leaders are. They can't even hack 3 days. I told you this was going to be the next battle. It's an uncomfortable battle to have. But former foreign ministers, Gareth Evans, Bob Carr, and now the one with the red shoes. She, of course, says that the language about weapons inspectors was just so over the top, not at all compromised by the fact that she now runs a university that, of course, relies upon Chinese students to make its budget to pay her wage.